Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into a story that honestly hits right at the core of human psychology and the invisible barriers that keep us totally stuck. We're going to unpack a really timeless story about a village that was literally terrified of building a bridge to its own future. So as we go through these slides, we're going to explore that massive tension between the safety we all kind of crave and the growth we all secretly really desire.
So let's kick things off with a pretty massive question. What is the true cost of staying comfortable? It's a concept we almost never actually calculate, right? We're so quick to measure the cost of taking a risk, but we rarely measure the cost of just doing absolutely nothing. Because, as we'll see as we dig into the source text for this story, the answer is almost always hidden, tucked away under layers of daily routine until it's simply way too late.
All right, Section 1, The Illusion of Comfort. Our story kicks off in a place that, it probably feels pretty familiar to a lot of us. Picture this perfect, totally undisturbed routine. Long ago, these villagers had absolutely everything they needed for a super comfortable life. They had abundant food, sturdy homes, and deeply familiar routines. And they were completely cut off from the rest of the world by this massive, wide river. No immediate struggle, no pressing danger, just perfectly comfortable. And I want you to think about your own life for a second here. You know those times when everything is just humming along predictably? It feels great. But it also creates a really subtle trap. Because just across that wide river lay a thriving city. And this sets up such a brilliant contrast. Really, it's the core conflict we face every single day. On one side, you have the village, comfortable, predictable, incredibly safe. But over on the other side, the city, packed with opportunities, fresh knowledge, and vast new possibilities. It's the ultimate showdown between the safety of what you already know and the immense, and sometimes terrifying potential of what could be. The villagers could literally see the potential right there, but they just couldn't reach it.
Which brings us to Section 2, the burden of risk.
See, the issue wasn't that they didn't want more. The problem was there was literally no bridge to connect them to those opportunities. Now, for generations, people in the village actually talked about building a bridge. They dreamed about it, but they were completely paralyzed by this endless loop of what-ifs. Why take the risk, right? What if the bridge collapses? What if life is actually worse over there? What if we try this huge project and we just completely fail? And honestly, these sound like super rational questions, don't they? They're the exact same questions our own brains use to keep us locked in our comfort zones. They were actively choosing to stay safe rather than take on the burden of risk. But then, out of nowhere, this young guy named Ravi steps up and just shatters their whole illusion with one brilliantly simple question. He asks them, what if staying here is the bigger risk? And the villagers, they actually laughed at him. They pointed at their food and their safe houses and told him to relax. They just could not perceive the invisible danger of stagnation.
But Ravi wasn't buying it. He was watching this slow-motion, compounding tragedy happen year after year in his community. It happened in these tiny stages. First, the artists stopped creating. Then the inventors stopped inventing, and eventually the young people just stopped believing they could do anything more than what their parents did. Incredible talent was just going to waste. And here's the huge takeaway. They didn't give up because they lacked the ability. Not at all. They gave up simply because they were comfortable. Comfort had basically become an anesthetic to their potential.
So determined to actually do something, Ravi just starts building the bridge, entirely by himself. And the timeline here is absolutely brutal. Day 1, he's actively mocked. Day 2, totally ignored. Day 3, they are openly taking bets that he's going to fail. And as months pass, the bridge is still unfinished. The story notes that Ravi wanted to quit so many times. Of course he did. Going back to being comfortable is always so much easier than fighting the current and dealing with everyone doubting you.
And that leads right into Section 3, the unforeseen crisis.
Right when he's about to throw in the towel, the narrative takes a very dark, sudden turn. Out of absolutely nowhere, one harsh winter, a terrible drought hits the village. That predictable safety they clung to for generations, it literally evaporated overnight.
The crops just completely failed. Those reliable, rock-solid foundations they built their entire lives on began to crumble rapidly. The daily routines that kept them so perfectly safe were suddenly utterly useless against this new reality.
The abundance just vanished, and food became incredibly scarce. And the psychological flip here is just fascinating to watch. The exact same people who laughed at Ravi, the ones who fiercely defended staying put, were suddenly in a state of absolute desperate panic. They were fearing for their survival. Their comfort zone had officially become a trap. For the very first time, the whole village got hit with this brutal reality check about the fatal flaw of their comfort zone.
Yes, comfort had beautifully protected them from small, everyday risks, but by doing that, it completely prevented them from preparing for much bigger, systemic challenges. By avoiding the manageable risk of building a bridge, they essentially exposed themselves to the catastrophic risk of a changing world with literally no escape route.
Which finally pushes them to Section 4, the bridge to growth.
Driven by total desperation. Not inspiration, mind you, but desperation. They finally get it. They band together, join Ravi, pull their strength, finish this monumental task, and finally cross that wide river. They stepped completely out of the only world they had ever known, right into the vast unknown.
So what happened when they actually crossed over? Did the sky fall? Did life get worse? No, the village absolutely flourished. By connecting with the city, they discovered things they couldn't have even imagined while sitting safely in their village. They found trade to replace their dead crops, education to spark their minds, totally new ideas and possibilities. They didn't just survive the drought, they literally leveled up their entire civilization.
Years down the line, kids in the village would ask Ravi why he worked so crazy hard on that bridge when literally everyone was mocking him. He just smiled and dropped this incredibly powerful piece of wisdom. He said, because comfort feels safe today, but growth protects tomorrow. Just let that sink in for a second. It's such a profound way to look at time and risk. We so often overvalue the safety of today completely at the expense of our security tomorrow.
The big takeaway from this explainer is crystal clear. First off, the absolute greatest danger in life isn't failing, it's getting so incredibly comfortable that you stop growing entirely. Second, if you've got a dream, you have to accept that every dream requires leaving something familiar behind. You can't discover new oceans if you aren't willing to lose sight of the shore. And finally, your future doesn't begin when you're 100% ready or perfectly safe. It begins the exact second you step outside your comfort zone. If you cling to comfort, you risk everything. But if you step into vulnerability, you actually secure your future.
So I'm going to leave you with this one final thought as we wrap things up. Take a look at your own life. Look at your routines, and look at the rivers you're currently too afraid to cross. Ask yourself honestly, what familiar comfort do you need to leave behind right now to build your bridge to tomorrow? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep building those bridges and seriously, never stop growing.